You ever just be hanging out, harvesting Nirnroot, and think to yourself, man, I wish I could be as powerful and as cool as a raid boss? Well, with Absolute Virtue as your commander, now you can be the raid boss. In this video, I'll provide a full commander deck list for Absolute Virtue, where you play as a raid boss. It'll include adds, immune phases, full heals, and like any good raid boss, it'll have ultimates. I'll also provide alternatives to the deck for budget or gameplay style variation. If you like these kind of in-depth deck explorations, feel free to subscribe to the channel for more, but for now, let's talk about Absolute Virtue. Absolute Virtue is an 8-mana value Azorius commander. It's an avatar warrior that's 8/8. Absolute Virtue can't be countered and has flying. Now the big deal here is that you, as the player, have protection from each of your opponents. Summarizing that effect, it means you can't be dealt damage, you can't be enchanted, or targeted by anything controlled by your opponents. Now I've seen some confusion as to what this actually can do for you. Firstly, it does not protect itself or your other creatures from like anything. Being targeted, damaged, enchanted, whatever. It protects you the player and only you the player, not itself. Secondly, some things can still affect you as the player, like things that affect each opponent or each player. Now if it says each player takes X damage, your protection would prevent the damage. But if it's something like Butcher of Malakir, you'll still be responsible for sacrificing a creature, or something like Bloodroot Apothecary, where if you sacrifice a non-creature token, you will still get the 2 poison counters. For those who don't know, Absolute Virtue was a Gigaboss in Final Fantasy XI, which was one of the MMO versions of Final Fantasy. It was notorious for being crazy tough with encounters that lasted like days, and the only way to beat it was through dubious means until years later when the level cap was increased. So this deck will comprise of sections of cards that will mimic certain raid mechanic tropes, like adds, Enrage, stuff like that, so that the deck does have raid boss vibes. Now this brings me to an important distinction that I want to make. While this deck mimics the feel of a raid boss, that's not to be confused with the archenemy. Decks that assume the position of archenemy are generally really powerful and make themselves targets. This deck is not that at all. It does have big game-changing spells and creatures, but it isn't really a threat, and it's super slow. It is more of a meme, and the next graphics will hope to elaborate on that. This deck falls into my high-budget tier, essentially meaning there are no limits. It comes in at about $500, however, a lot of the cards are considered staples in the format, Smothering Tithe, Rhystic Study, so there's a good chance you already have a few of the more expensive cards, or you could just have access to a printer. This deck technically qualifies for bracket 4. Though I would probably actually count it as a 1 or maybe 2. Its power level I would rate somewhere like a 4. It's not good, it's fun, and it's very thematic. It has powerful individual cards and tutor effects, but realistically this is just a fun deck where you try to roleplay as a raid boss. I would say it's strong versus decks with little interaction since your deck is, well, not good. It does run some game-altering cards that need to be dealt with, and if they're not dealt with, then that's good for you. And this deck is slow as frick, meaning any fast or combo deck will likely pop off before you can get one of your stabilizing presences in play. The full link for the deck list will be in the description below, as well as some of my affiliate links and the link to my Patreon to support the channel. No addendum videos since I've decided I just want to put the full effort into these main videos, and if you want to support me, great. If not, that's also great. I don't want to hide any content behind paywalls or anything. So as you watch the sectional breakdown, keep an eye out for this symbol in the lower left with the card. That means that that card will fit into a particular budget or different gameplay selection. It's an alternative that you can choose to run if you want. And without further ado, it's time to... We'll start with summons, which for this deck tries to evoke the thing where you sometimes have to trigger a raid boss to spawn, completing a quest, killing random mobs. Sometimes doing that can spawn a hidden boss or like a super boss. For us, we're just going to give all our creatures flash, allowing them to enter the battlefield and have a large impact out of nowhere. High-Fate Trickster and Sally Sparrow will both give your creatures flash, with the Trickster giving all your cards flash and Sally giving you a clue when a creature you control leaves the battlefield, which is not bad when a creature of yours dies. You need to be a bit greedy with this deck anyways, so the extra draw from happenstance clues isn't that bad. Progenitor's Icon gives you some ramp, though it's primarily there to give a card flash. Teferi Mage of Zalfir rounds out the summon section by giving all your creatures flash, but it also limits your opponents to casting essentially only spells during their main phase. Like any good raid boss, we're going to have a few adds. In the MMO context, adds generally are additional monsters that spawn to make the fight more complicated or challenging, but generally aren't much of a threat in and of themselves. They essentially act as complementary to the raid boss, much like Codsworth Handy Helper. We do have some big auras, which we'll get to in a later section, so the tapping abilities of Codsworth are still relevant, though I primarily run it to give Absolute Virtue Ward 2. All the cards in this section are fairly inexpensive mana value wise, because you want to have these in play as Absolute Virtue comes into play, so that Absolute Virtue has as much protection as possible. Protection like Bastion Protector or Vexilus Praetor, both of which will essentially do for Absolute Virtue what Absolute Virtue does for you. Finishing up the ads are Boromir, Warden of the Tower, and Selfless Samurai. Boromir can keep the game a bit fair as well as off itself to protect your commander. Selfless Samurai can also self-destruct to prevent Absolute Virtue, but Absolute Virtue is also a warrior, meaning Selfless Samurai can give it lifelink if it attacks alone. Not incredibly important, but it is there and it is going to be useful at some time. In most raids, you don't go straight to the final boss. You have to beat certain bosses in certain orders to unlock the next parts of the raid. This section will feature big, powerful creatures who serve essentially as sub-bosses, the henchmen of your boss. And it turns out angels just love being henchmen apparently, like Angel of the Ruins and Angel of Serenity. Angel of the Ruins is a powerful 2x disenchant effect, and a Angel of Serenity can do some work as creature removal. Sarah's Emissary and Angelic Arbiter are both angels with huge game-changing effects. Similarly, Emiria Shepherd and Herald of Eternal Dawn are game-changing if left unchecked. All these angels have really powerful abilities, and they're all really good. Luminate Primordial is one of my all-time favorite cards in control decks that feature white, and it turns out Highcliff Felidar is like a second to one of those. Hooray for me. Diluvian Primordial and Cityscape Leveler will level cityscapes and, primordialize diluvials? It gives you free spells from your opponent's graveyards is basically what it does. Last but not least is Nezahal Primal Tide, who kind of does it all, draws cards, protects itself, it's just fun big stuff. Now all the best raid fights have these immune phases, and you know those parts of the fight where you can't damage or do anything to the boss and it just kind of moves to another platform or sits there and talks about their evil plan or summons more guys or whatever. Now the important part is that this part makes these sections of the fights great in that you do nothing, you just sit there and don't play the game. Like if you have out your Absolute Virtue and have either Fierce Guardianship or Flawless Maneuver in your hand, your opponents just sit there and can't do jack about it. Similarly, Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots can get out before your Virtue turn and then attach it after it comes into play, making it much more difficult to deal with. Florin's Escape is just a good way to keep Absolute Virtue or any of your progression bosses on the field. While not in the deck, if you do choose to use the alternative below, which is Monologue Tax, you do get bonus flavor points, especially if you give a monologue when you cast it. Now the most critical part of the raid boss experience that we're constructing is this. You must, and I mean must, click the like button on this video. It's super important, and without it, all of your plans will crumble to dust, like not just in Magic. Now, to be honest, these charging cards are just sculpting cards, but it's the best way to convey when a big boss like charges up for an attack and draws on the primordial forces of nature to smite its foes. Think of like a giant Kirby sucking up supernatural powers, then unleashing them on his enemies, which is actually kind of hard to imagine, so I made this AI rendition of Kirby sucking up supernatural powers, then unleashing them on his enemies, which actually did a pretty good job. I mean, good job, AI. Gotta give credit where it's due. We'll start with Archmage's Charm and Alms Collector. The Charm gives us a bit of versatility, and Alms Collector can help keep the card draw fair by stealing card draws from your opponents and giving them to you, and that is fair. Esper Sentinel and Mystic Remora are both low mana value card draw, but you can get a lot of cards for your initial investment. Now we get to the big stuff in Heuristic Study and Consecrated Sphinx, and both of these are kind of boring but incredibly powerful. And quite frankly, without the advantage that cards like these provide, you're playing a big battlecruiser deck but without powerful green ramp. And then we get to the even bigger stuff, like the One Ring. It gives protection, so it is somewhat fitting in the theme of the deck, the whole raid boss immune thing. And you do have some synergy as far as you have cards that let you not lose the game, so the burden counters don't outright kill you eventually, but the deck isn't built to abuse the One Ring, so I'm fine with using it here. Now, if you're familiar with going into floor POV and having a raid leader yell at you for messing up mechanics, then you know that raid bosses usually have some sort of ultimate attack. If not deterred, it will destroy everyone in the entire raid. And these cards don't always destroy the entire table, but they are big, powerful spells that can put you in a very advantageous position. Cards like Blatant Thievery, where you get to steal a permanent from each player, or Ascend from Avernus, where you can pay, well, frankly, a lot of mana to get back all your progression bosses and ads and stuff. One with the Multiverse will get you a free spell each turn, which ideally will be some giant 8 mana value card. Emergency Powers is a fine twister effect with the bonus that you can put a giant card into play right after. The funny thing being that it is possible you end up with 7 cards that don't have a non-land permanent that costs 7 or less in your hand, and that's just kind of how it goes with decks like these. Now, 2 of my faves, the first being Dimensional Breach, which I'm kind of surprised wasn't banned, considering World Week was banned for so long. I guess it's because eventually the cards do come back and your opponents get their first chance to return stuff. You do generally want to use this when you have an overwhelming card that can hold down the fort for the first round while everyone is bringing other stuff back, and you have one giant card kind of holding off everyone. The second is Idrisil Rebirth Engine. Now, I wouldn't use it with a graveyard full of big progression bosses, since if they remove the engine, you essentially strand all those extra creatures in exile. But if you exile like 1, then use the engine right away, well, 7 mana for a 7 mana creature is usually pretty fair. You don't run a ton of creatures, so I would be careful with using the exile ability, since I don't know you can really rely on getting creatures with that ability. We all know that feeling of when the DPS is so focused on smashing buttons and not caring about threat or position that they forget to interrupt the boss. And lo and behold, the boss's Giga Heal gets off and we essentially have to start the fight over thanks to a giant fucking heal. Thanks a lot, John. You fucking suck. And here are some cards to fill your life back to the start. Exquisite Angel will fill your life back to full with the condition that you essentially have to die first. Be careful against like infect players, because if you do die from poison, you will heal back to full life, but then just die again from poison like a dummy. Invincible Hymn will more or less get you back to starting life, if not more, but it is very bad versus mill strategies. And Resolute Archangel will just reset you back to your starting life, as well as giving you a fine body afterwards. Most raid bosses have what's called an Enrage timer, which essentially means that they will just flip out and go nutso kill crazy if they aren't defeated within a certain amount of time. For us, it means that we turn our Absolute Virtue into an Absolute Giga Chad. These are all auras which will be good if you got your Codsworth early. Flaming Fist and Duelist Heritage will give your commander double strike, which is good. It's also good that you can have these set up and in play before Absolute Virtue comes online. Duelist Heritage is the much better option since you can use it with your progression bosses and even use it as political leverage, since it doesn't require your creatures attacking, just any creatures, and you can make deals to prevent death. Pimmon's Aura will turn any creature into Superman, and Righteous Authority will get you an extra card draw each turn, plus a big power and toughness boost. The obvious Giga Chad aura is Eldrazi Conscription. There was a brief moment where I was thinking of making an Eldrazi deck for this theme and decided that discretion is the better part of wisdom. Now, all good raids must come to an end, and they usually end with everybody dead. To that end, these cards will make most things dead. Austere Command and Cleansing Nova are there to mostly deal with problematic artifacts and enchantments, in addition to being able to destroy creatures. Settle the Wreckage is very powerful, though limited to just one player and only attacking creatures. If you want a more consistent board wipe that wipes all creatures, probably just roll with the OG Wrath of God. The rest of the wipes will all allow you to save or bring back your Absolute Virtue when you wipe the board. Slash the Ranks will wipe but save all commanders. Hopefully your commander is more impactful than theirs. Final Showdown can be cast smallly for some protection or bigly for some wipe and protection. Starfall Invocation and the Knight of the Doctor will wipe all creatures and then bring one of yours back eventually, either the next turn or right away if you gave the gift with the invocation. The ramp is fairly simple since we need to get our big spells and we don't want to try anything fancy to ruin that. That means we start with Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, as much as it pains me to say. Talisman of Progress and Azorius Signet are staples, and Belwar Stone and Mind Stone round out the strictly 2-mana rocks. Everflowing Chalice is like a 2-mana rock plus, since it can get you more mana later in the game, and that's not bad for us. Deep Gnome Terramancer and Scheming Fence are the creature ramp, with Deep Gnome Terramancer being an A+ card, and Scheming Fence being like an S tier card. Like seriously, at worst it steals a ramp effect, at best it shuts down your opponent's entire game plan. And then we get to Smothering Tithe, which is just kind of a necessary evil when you have giant monsters and not very good ramp. I choose not to list any utility lands, as there aren't any that really fit the theme of the deck. However, the mana land section does have a lot of basics, which you can take out a few and slot in your favorite utility land and mix and match to get whatever utility you feel you need. I run 15 lands that can generate Azorius, and these are just the best I have. None of them are particularly unique or required. Use what you got. I finish off the deck with 9 islands and 11 plains, and again, feel free to remove either of these evenly to add utility lands of your choice. The early and mid game for this deck is simple: survive. Then when you get to the late game, leverage your giant crap to crap on your opponents. Ideally, you would want a balance of ramp and charging cards in your opening hand, but really anything that isn't a handful of 7-mana value cards is probably okay. If you're looking for another Azorius deck, but maybe a bit more aggressive or a bit more budget-minded, check out this deck tech for Isha Tanaka Armor. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.